When I was in college, it was a real boon for those sorts of adult comedies where everyone had depression and you could go a full episode without telling a real joke. Stuff like You're the Worst, BoJack Horseman, that sort of thing. I ate it up. One of my favorites from recent years that was a sort of dramatic comedy was The Good Place. In a season 2 episode called Existential Crisis, Eleanor describes them as this.
All humans are aware of death. So we're all a little bit sad. All the time. That's just the deal.
It's something that's really stuck with me since that episode. In recent years, I've gotten more into anime, and what I find really interesting is how they approach sadness completely differently than those shows. They see them as separate ideas, but never conflicting with each other.
It's stuff like Neon Genesis Evangelion, mashing up high school hijinks with esoteric depression, often in the same episode. Full Metal Alchemist is a mostly serious show that always finds space for a joke here and there, without ever undercutting its weight. My Hero Academia lets Momoya Yorozu just be sad in the background for a full season before finally deciding to pay it off. But one anime's sense of sadness captivated me more than any other. The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, a comedy series that is so chock full of these sorts of, melancholic moments that are so often overlooked by fans.
The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya is a Japanese anime that aired its first season in 2006, its second season in 2009, and wrapped up with a finale movie in 2010 titled The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. What I find so interesting about this show is that for all intents and purposes, it is a comedy. It has jokes and hijinks, and I think most fans would refer to it as being a lighthearted show, which I find so interesting because I was captivated by its sadness.
The show follows the SOS Brigade, a club formed by Haruhi Suzumiya with the goal of discovering strange phenomena in the universe, specifically aliens, time travelers, and espers. In short, to discover a world that's more interesting than the one she's living in now. The narrator of the show is Kyon, Haruhi's classmate who inspired her to start the club.
Haruhi, on the surface, is a classic manic pixie dream girl. She's meant to be pretty and quirky, and seemingly exists solely to give Kyon a new lease on life.
Her quirky habits include drawing symbols on her middle school lawn to try and get the attention of aliens, joining and quitting a new club every day, and wearing her hair in a different knot daily. But her favorite hobby is pushing Kyon's buttons, trying to make him more adventurous. Honestly, you half expect her to turn around to Kyon, hand him some headphones, and tell him a Shin song will change his life.
Kyon, on the other hand, is a high school Byronic hero. He even says at the very beginning of the whole show that he's put away these childish things for high school and he just wants to stop believing in this sort of nonsense.
He just wants to survive the next 3 years of high school without any incident. When he gets caught up in Haruhi's hijinks, however, he tends to just complain about the tiniest details.
It's at this point that I feel like I've completely understood the show, and it's just any other high school comedy. Haruhi will slowly break down Kyon's walls, and they'll maybe even fall in love. But in the show's second episode, it completely pulls the rug out from under me. In it, the club's third member, Yuki Nagato, reveals that she isn't just a normal high school student.
She's actually an alien, sent here by the Data Integration Thought Entity, with the explicit goal of monitoring Haruhi Suzumiya. Soon after, the two other club members, Mikuru and Koizumi, tell Kyon that they are a time traveler and an esper, respectively, with the same mission. So why is everyone obsessed with Haruhi? Well, 3 years ago, she wished on a star for her life to be more interesting, and since then, the world has shifted to fit her unconscious whims.
In the fifth episode, we learn why she made that wish. As a child, she went to a baseball game, and for the first time in her life, was confronted by how exactly big the world is.
Brushing my teeth and going to sleep at night, waking up and eating breakfast in the morning, that stuff happened all over the place. They were everyday things that everybody was doing. When I thought about it like that, everything became boring. If there's really that many people in the world, then there had to be someone who wasn't ordinary. There had to be someone who was living an interesting life. There just had to be. But why wasn't I that person?
The side effect of Haruhi's powers, however, is her sadness. Since she's constantly looking for the world to be more interesting, she's a little sad all the time because to her, it isn't.
Her sadness creates closed spaces, parallel dimensions that have the ability to end the world. At the climax of the show's first story, she and Kyon wake up in a closed space. Haruhi is ecstatic, believing that something interesting has finally happened to her. Kyon, knowing the stakes, is trying everything he can to snap Haruhi out of it. But nothing works. Nothing can convince Haruhi that the real world is better. Right before it ends, Kyon does the one thing he can think of. He kisses her. This one act, this single connection to another person, is enough to get Haruhi out of her melancholy.
In a later story, titled The Sigh of Haruhi Suzumiya, Haruhi decides to direct a short film with the SOS Brigade as her cast. As Haruhi is wont to do, she gets a little pushy with the brigade, and Kyon pushes back, causing one of the worst fights the two have through the whole series.
Mikuru, again the time traveler, insists that they stop fighting or else, but stops herself from saying why, because it's classified, meaning it has some bearing on the future. Almost as if Haruhi and Kyon are cosmically tied together, that time itself needs them to stay together. This is shown to be true at least once, where a time-traveling Kyon helps Haruhi with the middle school vandalism I previously mentioned.
As the SOS Brigade spends more time together, Yuki Nagato spends more time away from the data integration thought entity. She slowly becomes more of her own person, however, this amount of time is compounded greatly by the Endless 8 storyline.
During the Endless 8, the brigade is caught in a time loop during the last 2 weeks of summer. Haruhi has an elaborate plan for how they'll spend those 2 weeks together, but leaves the last day open for suggestions. Every time, no one has anything, so Haruhi calls off the last day, and time resets. The only one conscious during these loops is Yuki Nagato, because of the data integration thought entity. However, she is not allowed to intervene, and as such, has to sit idly by as time resets over and over again. Each episode sees Yuki become a little more detached every time, speaking a little less, eating and drinking a little less. She lives a full 600 years in this time loop, slowly becoming her own person, but also developing her own existential crisis. In the end, the answer to Haruhi's problem was a simple one. Kyon had to ask her for help with his homework, for the whole club to do theirs together. Haruhi made a 2-week plan to reach out to her friends. All she wanted was someone to reach back out to her.
Yuki Nagato's existential crisis comes to a head during the film The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. In it, she steals Haruhi's powers and creates a world where Haruhi and Kyon have never met, hopefully freeing her from her sadness.
In this new timeline, Haruhi and Kyon attend different schools, and Yuki is just a normal, shy high school girl with a massive crush on Kyon. The only person who remembers the old world is Kyon, and the only memory Yuki kept from the real world was from the second episode, where Kyon helps her get a library card. Yuki clearly cherishes this moment and her connection to Kyon. Kyon slowly puts the pieces together and is given the opportunity to choose between the two worlds. Before he returns to the real world, however, he has a conversation with himself to explain why he made that decision. His internal self points out all the times Kyon complained about Haruhi and having to put up with her, of having this burden to keep the peace in the real world. Why would Kyon ever choose that pain over the easy life of this new world? The answer? Haruhi. Yes, he complained about her nonstop, but he needs her, and he knows that he is better for the adventures she put him through.
You'd have to be crazy to think it wasn't fun. Only the biggest idiot in the world would say it wasn't fun if they were asked. They'd be 30 times more dense than Haruhi. Aliens? Time travelers and espers, man? One's enough. But no, I got to hang out with all three. And then there's Haruhi, who's got the craziest power of them all. And then there's all these other mysterious powers sprinkled all over the place. How could I not find all this stuff fun, huh? Ask me as many times as you want, and my answer won't change.
The film ends with Kyon, safe in the original timeline, talking to Yuki about the adventure. He doesn't blame her for feeling feelings. He affirms to her that the SOS Brigade will always be there for her, that she has someone to lean on as well.
Shows like Youre the Worst and BoJack Horseman often revolved around the characters falling and refalling into their self-destructive traps. While this is true for a lot of people, I found a lot of emotional honesty in Haruhi's ability to ask, well, what are you going to do about it? The show is about that fear and that sadness and accepting it and finding a way to move forward. The show's clear answer is that you need friends to do that. Is this simple? Well, yeah, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. As a brief addendum, I want to talk about the show's spin-off, The Disappearance of Nagato Yuki-chan, which aired in 2015. It's set in the same timeline established in the movie, so Haruhi goes to a different high school, and Nagato is just a shy bookworm. While the show strips away all of the sci-fi elements and becomes much more of a high school slice-of-life show, these themes of sadness and needing each other still permeate throughout.
Towards the end of the series, Yuki is nearly hit by a car, and it causes her to shut down a little. She becomes colder, more reserved, almost like an alien. This other Yuki struggles with her identity, as she feels like she is a different person from that previous Yuki, but is slowly regaining that Yuki's memories. Most importantly, her crush on Kyon. Is Kyon being nice to her because he's friends with the previous Yuki, or does he truly care about her? Eventually, other Yuki comes to realize when the previous Yuki will take back control. She decides to have one perfect last day, and ends it by using her dying breath to tell Kyon that she loves him, something the previous Yuki had never been able to do for the better part of a year. Knowing that she has nothing left to lose, she reaches out to Kyon, and his biggest regret for the rest of the series is being unable to reach back to her. He does eventually, in his own way, at the end of the series.
The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya portrays sadness in a way that I've never really seen on television before. It neither ignores it, nor does it wallow in it. It accepts it, and it moves forward. I think it's hard not to see yourself in either Haruhi, Kyon, or Yuki, having people reach out to you, and this show has taught me how to reach back out to them. So maybe you've been watching this whole video and thinking, hey Patrick, what anime would you recommend for me to watch? And I think after seeing this, I think my answer would be really clear. I think the anime you have to watch is Keep Your Hands Off of Aizuken. I'm serious, it's an incredible show, better than anything I've just talked about. Watch Keep Your Hands Off Aizuken.